I wanted to talk to you also, Ken, about another issue. We got some extraordinary, I guess, comments from former State Department spokesperson Matt Miller, who became, quite infamous from being up at the podium and defending things that should be indefensible in the context of our support of Israel, as Israel is committing what I and many scholars see as a genocide in Gaza. Now he comes out and says, yeah, obviously Israel is committing war crimes. That's completely apparent. I just couldn't say it at the time because I was representing the government. Let's take a listen to what he has to say now.
Let me ask you directly, after everything we've seen over these past months, with the overwhelming civilian casualties, the destruction of entire neighborhoods, the restrictions on humanitarian aid, do you believe what's happening in Gaza right now meets the definition of genocide under international law? That's a very serious accusation that requires careful legal analysis. While the scale of civilian suffering is undeniably horrific, I wouldn't personally characterize it as genocide. However, what I can say with absolute certainty is that there have been numerous incidents that clearly constitute war crimes under international humanitarian law. But when you were serving as State Department spokesperson, you never used that language. You consistently defended Israel's actions and avoided any suggestion of war crimes. Why the change in tone now? There's an important distinction here that needs to be understood. When you're speaking as an official representative of the U.S. government, your words aren't your own personal opinions, you're conveying the carefully considered position of the administration. At the time, our internal assessments were ongoing, and we hadn't reached an official determination that Israel had violated international humanitarian law. That remains the case today, technically speaking. But you're admitting now that in your personal view, these were war crimes happening in real time while you were publicly defending Israel's conduct. That seems like a pretty significant contradiction. Let me clarify how I see this, because it's more nuanced than that. There are really two separate questions here. First, whether there have been specific incidents where Israeli forces violated the laws of war, individual cases of disproportionate force, attacks on protected civilian sites, things of that nature.
Your thoughts on that, Ken?
I mean, on the one hand, it's of course outrageous that he's willing to work for an administration that he clearly didn't agree with. But on the other hand, I'll tell you, and I talked to a lot of people from state, including diplomats, what he's saying is pretty much in line with what a lot of these guys would say privately when I talk to them. I mean, it's the Agency for Diplomacy. It shouldn't surprise us that they see these things and have these attitudes. But what does surprise me is how it shows you how out of step President Biden was with his own administration.
Yeah.
That so many people, including this paid flack, are coming out and saying this stuff. Like Biden had really, strongly held views about Israel that were not consistent with much of the rest of his administration.
I mean, I think most people would feel like even if you are a paid spokesperson, like that doesn't just give you license to lie. And that is the moral position that he's effectively articulating here. So there's that. It's also astonishing to me the continued levels of spin at this point in time. I mean, you've got frickin' Piers Morgan out being like, what can I say? Y'all were right. It's a genocide. I mean, the number of Israeli officials, all you have to listen to is their own statements when he's trying to parse, well, there might have been individual war crimes, but I don't know if it was government policy. It's like, really? Did you not see them announce a policy of mass starvation and blockade of the entire Gaza Strip? Like, have you not watched as we've had month after month after month of total annihilation and people being massacred as they go and try to get food aid? Have you not listened to what Bibi Netanyahu is saying about how, we're just going to use this aid as a pretext to basically engage in ethnic cleansing? Like, it's wild to me at this point that you could still engage in that level of self-delusion to pretend that maybe this was just rogue actors within the IDF and they haven't been punished appropriately, but they were just doing, their own thing, rather than a very clear, consistent, concerted government policy at a time when, like I said, even figures like Piers Morgan have figured out that this is the case.
Yeah, not just Piers, but various officials from powerful European governments like France, for instance. I mean, this is a sea change.
Even Germany.
Yeah, these are very powerful, wealthy European states saying these things. Something is happening over the last several weeks. I looked at that and I couldn't figure out what was driving it, but there's absolutely a shift that we haven't seen at any point since October 7th.
So just for people's recollection, let's go ahead and take a listen to some of the things that he was saying when he was at the podium.
That's where Israel's response has been disappointing, to say the least. While there have been some isolated investigations, we haven't seen the kind of systemic accountability that would demonstrate the military justice system is functioning properly. How does it feel personally, looking back now, knowing you had to publicly defend actions you privately believed were criminal? That must create some moral dissonance. It's complicated. The State Department's internal assessments did acknowledge the likelihood of war crimes occurring, and in some of my press briefings I tried to signal that through careful wording, even if I couldn't state it explicitly. But you're right, there's an unavoidable tension when your professional obligations require you to articulate positions that may conflict with your personal moral judgments. That's the nature of public service in these roles. What matters is continuing to push internally for policies that align with our values and international obligations. And do you believe the U.S. government will eventually reach an official determination that war crimes were committed? Based on the evidence that's publicly available and what we know internally, I think it's virtually certain that conclusion will be reached at some point. The question is when, and what consequences, if any, will follow from that determination. These processes move slowly by design, as they should when making such grave accusations against an ally. But the facts on the ground speak for themselves, and history will judge accordingly.
To defend itself.
So, Ken, I'd like you to talk a little bit about the moral calculation that goes on here, because I think in some instances, people could be sympathetic to the idea that, like, look, you're a spokesperson for this other politician. It's impractical to think your views are going to line up 100% of the time. You aren't speaking for yourself. You're speaking on behalf of this agency. You're speaking on behalf of the president, whatever. So there are going to be times when you represent something that is not truly your own personal view. It seems very different when you're talking about something like war crimes and crimes against humanity. And I do think the willingness of someone like a Matt Miller to stand up there and say things he knows is not true, to remain in that job, even as it's not just Israel committing war crimes, it's us funding, providing diplomatic cover for, lying on their behalf, shipping weapons in order for them to perpetrate those war crimes. Like, that is, to me, a morally unconscionable decision to make. So talk a little bit about that moral landscape and the rationale that does go through the minds of people like Matthew Miller, who end up adopting this pathetic line of defense. Oh, I was just following orders.
Yeah, the capacity for rationalization has to be strong if you're going to be a spokesperson for an organization like that. And he clearly has that. I was amazed at how breezily he was able to put it off. I mean, if I did an interview like that, I'd be kind of embarrassed and kind of like, here's what I'm doing to try to, make up for what I said before.
Right.
I mean,
it's like he has war crimes. Yeah. But I was just doing my job.
It speaks to the culture, because he must be surrounded by people that also are making these, very morally compromising decisions, and they're also used to it that it doesn't even merit looking a little embarrassed or trying to explain what you're doing to make up for your position before. That's the most disturbing feature of it, is how when they're breezy about it, that means that they're used to it and they're surrounded by other people that are used to it.
Yeah, that's such a great point. Ken, tell people where they can follow you and support your work.
I'm on Substack. You can find me at kenklippenstein.com.
All right, Ken.